I'm Maddie. I'm sitting in my car, driving away from my family's house, the late afternoon air cool and crisp against my face. Through the rear-view mirror, I can see them standing in the doorway, shocked and devastated. Their entire understanding of reality has been upended in a matter of minutes, and I can't say I feel sorry for them. Just an hour ago, I was sitting at the dining table, calmly cutting my turkey, while my family berated me for my so-called lack of success. My older brother Ethan had been on a roll, mocking me for my job in tech, which they all assumed was a dead end. Maddie, stop pretending to be successful on LinkedIn. It's embarrassing for the whole family, he'd said earlier that morning in a text. I remembered the look on his face when he sent that message. He was so sure of himself, so convinced that I was a failure. And to be fair, it was easy for them to think that way. For years, I'd kept my work a secret. I'd founded Neurotech Innovations in my sparsely furnished apartment in San Francisco 7 years ago with just $8,000 in savings and a revolutionary idea for brain-computer interfaces. I thought back to the early days. When I was 25, I dropped out of my engineering Ph.D. program to pursue my startup. My dad, a traditional man who worked as a senior manager at a large law firm, was furious. "You're throwing away your future for some pipe dream," he'd said. My mom, always more gentle but equally skeptical, told her friends I was going through a phase. As the years went by, the mockery only intensified. When I was 28, living on instant noodles and coding 18-hour days, they all thought I was just wasting my time. Ethan, who'd landed a high-profile job as a car dealership manager, took every opportunity to remind me of my supposed lack of success. He'd show up at family gatherings in his new BMW, bragging about his promotions and sales numbers. On this Thanksgiving, I arrived at my parents' house in the suburbs of Los Angeles. The house smelled of turkey and disappointment, just like always. Ethan was already there, a beer in hand, wearing a polo shirt with his dealership's logo. "Work, huh? How's the coding going, little brother? Built any real apps yet?" He laughed. My aunt, Lily, and uncle, Tom, arrived soon after, followed by my cousin, Ava, and her husband, Ben. The living room filled with the usual pre-dinner small talk, and I knew what was coming. "So, Maddie," Aunt Lily said with a false smile, "still doing that computer thing? Is it even a real job?" I tried to stay calm. "It's going fine," I said. But Ethan wasn't having it. "Fine? You've been saying that for years. Meanwhile, some of us have actual careers and responsibilities. I just sold 40 cars last month and I'm up for a regional manager position." My dad, who arrived late from a work emergency, sat down at the head of the table. "Maddie, your mother tells me you're still working on those computer projects. How's that going?" he asked, his voice laced with doubt. I took a deep breath. "It's going well." "Well? What does well mean? Are you making money? Building a real business?" Dad pressed. I tried to explain, but Ethan interrupted. "He's been at this for almost a decade with nothing to show for it. He lives in a tiny apartment in the most expensive city in the country. How does he even afford it?" I mentioned rent control, which was true, but they didn't believe me. They thought I was just scraping by, a failure who couldn't hold down a real job. The conversation turned more heated. Ava suggested I get a job at a big tech company like Amazon or Microsoft. "At least then you'd have stability and a real salary," she said. Uncle Tom chimed in, "When I was your age, I had a mortgage, a family, and a successful career." "What do you have, Maddie?" "An apartment and a laptop." I tried to defend myself, but it was no use. They'd already made up their minds. Ethan pulled out his phone and showed my LinkedIn profile. "Founder and CEO of Neurotech Innovations? What a joke. It's probably just a made-up title," he sneered. Just as I was about to respond, the TV in the living room erupted with the CNN breaking news sound. Mom had left it on low volume, but the urgent tone made everyone turn their heads. "We interrupt your regular programming for breaking news in the tech sector," the anchor announced. My cousin Ava walked over to the TV, curious. Her face went completely white. "Oh my God," she whispered. Ethan got up, annoyed at the interruption. But when he saw the screen, he froze. That can't be," he stammered. The CNN anchor's voice carried clearly into the dining room. Tech innovator Maddie's Neurotech Innovations launches a highly anticipated IPO tomorrow morning with initial valuations reaching $3.5 billion. My LinkedIn photo appeared on the screen, the same one Ethan had mocked just minutes before. The entire family rushed to the living room, but I stayed seated at the dining table, calmly taking another bite of turkey, which was actually quite good this year. The anchor continued. The 30-year-old Stanford dropout has been working in secrecy from a small San Francisco apartment, developing revolutionary technology that could change how humans interact with computers. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of shock. "That's you on CNN. They're saying you're worth about $1.68 billion on paper," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My dad pushed past him, his phone out, frantically typing. Neurotech Innovations, Brain-Computer Interfaces. Series D funding of $900 million. The reports are real. "This is you," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. Aunt Lily appeared, her face pale. "You've been working on this for 7 years and you never said anything." I looked at her calmly. "You never asked what I was actually working on. You just assumed it was nothing." My phone started buzzing with texts from colleagues and investors who'd seen the coverage. I silenced it and returned to my dinner. Ava was crying quietly in the doorway. We said all those things. "And you were building a company," she said. Ethan had his phone out, scrolling through articles. "Forbes has you listed as one of tomorrow's new billionaires. TechCrunch is calling Neurotech the most important IPO of the year," he said, looking up at me, devastated. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked. "Would you have believed me?" I asked simply. The question hung in the air. They all knew the answer. If I'd told them 3 years ago that I was building something revolutionary, they would have laughed at me. Dad sank into his chair. "You let us believe you were struggling. You sat through years of dinners where we questioned your choices, your career, your life. You never once defended yourself. Would my defense have mattered? Or would you have just found new ways to doubt me?" I asked. Mom's phone rang. She answered it automatically, still in shock. "Hello. Yes, this is Susan. You're from a media company. You want to interview me? About Maddie." She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mix of fear, confusion, and something that might have been pride if it wasn't so tainted with shame. "They want to interview you, all of you probably. About what it was like watching me build Neurotech. About how the family supported my journey," I said, the sarcasm not lost on anyone. Ethan let out a sound that was half a laugh, half a sob. "Supported your journey? Jesus Christ. We called you a failure. To your face. Today." I nodded. "Yes, you did. And you just sat there thinking you knew me, but you were completely wrong. You assumed, you judged, you mocked. And at no point did any of you stop to think that maybe I knew what I was doing." My dad's phone rang. It was his firm's senior partner. "Hello, John." "Yes, I'm watching the news." "Yes, that's my son. You want to discuss consulting opportunities with Neurotech?" I don't think." He hung up, looking sick. "They want me to leverage my relationship with you to get your company as a client. They're calling it the opportunity of a lifetime," he said quietly. I looked at him. "Why would I do that? You just spent the last hour explaining that I have no accomplishments, no real career, nothing to show for 7 years of work. Why would someone like that be in a position to help your firm? Mom pleaded, we didn't know. If we had known. If you had known, you would have treated me completely differently. You would have been proud, supportive, interested in my work. But you didn't know, so instead you spent 7 years making me feel like a disappointment at every family gathering. The question is, which version of you is real? The one that respects success after it's proven, or the one that supports family unconditionally? No one answered. Ava's husband, Ben, who'd been silent throughout the dinner, spoke up. For what it's worth, I always thought you were working on something interesting. You had that focus, that intensity. I thanked him, but I also pointed out, you also never once asked me about it or defended me when others attacked my choices. So your observation is noted, but not particularly meaningful. Ethan sat down heavily at the table, his head in his hands. I texted you this morning. I told you to stop pretending to be successful. And you just responded that you'd see me at 1 p.m. You didn't correct me. You didn't defend yourself. I looked at him. Yes, I let you believe what you wanted to believe. Because I learned something important over the last 7 years. The people who truly support you don't wait for proof of success to offer respect. They trust you because they know you, not because Forbes validates your worth. Mom was crying openly now. We do know you. You're our son, our brother. Do you? Because you spent 7 years thinking you knew me and you were completely wrong, I said. Dad's voice was barely audible. What do you want from us? Nothing. That's what I've wanted for 7 years. Nothing except to be left alone to work on something I believed in. And that's still what I want, I said honestly. Aunt Lily looked stricken. You're not going to forgive us? We made a mistake. I corrected her, you made a choice. You chose to believe the worst about me despite having no actual evidence. You chose to mock instead of support, to question instead of trust, to assume failure instead of giving me the benefit of the doubt. Those were choices, not mistakes. My phone buzzed with another text from my CFO. Stock market is going crazy with anticipation. We're trending on every platform. You should see the pre-market numbers. I glanced at the message and smiled slightly. Ethan asked desperately, what is it? Just work, I said. The TV was still playing, showing an extended segment about Neuroteca's technology and its potential applications. Uncle Tom watched the TV and said, that's what you've been building. That's what we called a hobby. I confirmed, yes. And the apartment you thought I could barely afford? I own the building. Bought it 2 years ago as an investment property. I still live in the same unit because I like it there. Mom gasped. I continued, the BMW in Ethan's driveway cost about $90,000. My company's annual revenue last year was $380 million. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this so you understand exactly how wrong you were. About everything. Ava asked quietly, so what happens now? Are you going to cut us out of your life? I said, I'm going to finish my dinner, and then I'm going to drive back to San Francisco. Tomorrow morning, I have an IPO to manage. Next week, I have meetings with Fortune 500 companies about integrating our technology. Next month, I'm speaking at a tech conference in Tokyo. And through all of that, I'll be doing exactly what I've been doing for 7 years. Working on something I believe in regardless of what anyone else thinks. Dad asked, and us? Where do we fit in? I looked at him steadily. I don't know yet. That's something I'll need to think about. Because right now, I'm having trouble reconciling the family that raised me with the family that spent 7 years convinced I was a failure. And I'm not sure which one is real. As I stood up, my dinner finished, Mom pleaded, Maddie, wait. You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. I interrupted gently, What you need to do is think about how you treat people before you know their net worth. Because the way you treated me tonight, that's who you really are, and the way you're treating me now after CNN, that's just damage control. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Mom asked desperately, "Will you come to Christmas?" I said honestly, "I don't know. I'll let you know." Ethan stood up suddenly. "I'm sorry. God, Maddie, I'm so sorry. Everything I said, everything I've said over the years, I was wrong." I corrected him, "You were honest. And that's actually worse because you genuinely believed I was a failure. That tells me everything I need to know about what you think of me when the cameras aren't rolling." I opened the door and stepped out into the cool air. Dad's voice cracked as he asked, "What can we do? How do we fix this?" I considered the question carefully. "I honestly don't know if you can. The problem isn't what you said today. The problem is that you believed it. For 7 years, you believed I was wasting my life, and nothing I said or did convinced you otherwise. You needed CNN to change your mind. What does that say about us?" I didn't wait for an answer. I got in my car, a modest Toyota Corolla that I'd been driving for 5 years, the same car Ethan had once mocked as boring. As I pulled away from the curb, I could see them all standing in the doorway, trying to process what had happened. My phone rang as I merged onto the highway. It was my co-founder, Mia. "How did it go?" she asked. "About how I expected," I said. "Did you tell them before the news broke?" "No. I wanted to see what they really thought of me." "Turns out I was right to keep my distance," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "You sound calm." "I am calm. I made peace with their opinion of me years ago. Today just confirmed what I already knew. They never believed in me. They believed in success, and those are very different things." "Are you going to reconcile with them?" "Maybe, or maybe not. Right now, I'm going to focus on the IPO, on the company, on the work. The family stuff can wait until I'm ready to deal with it, if I ever am," I said. "Fair enough," Mia said. "For what it's worth, we believed in you. The whole team. We always have." "I know. That's why we succeeded. Because we surrounded ourselves with people who didn't need CNN to tell them we were building something real," I said. I hung up and drove through the fading light toward San Francisco, toward my apartment, and toward the life I'd built despite everyone's doubts. Behind me, my family was left to grapple with the realization that they'd misjudged me so completely. But that was their problem. I had an IPO to launch.